We are the One Story Podcast. We believe in the power of a story. Everyone has a story, and that story is meaningful. Your story can make a difference. Your story can inspire others. Your story is important. At the same time, ultimately, everyone's story is a part of one story, the big God story.
It's not what you said. You're not who you said you were. When are you alone? When will you come back home?
All right, everyone, we're back again with the One Story Podcast. My name is Drew, and I'm with Isaac.
Hey, buddy.
And we have we're going to be continuing last episode with Tom and Rachel.
So episode 16, part 2.
Yeah, 16 or 15 minus divided by 6. So we're here, we're doing
You got to carry the one.
Yeah, whatever episode it is. So we're excited about it. But yeah, I think we just jump right in. It's already been just a great story coming from Tom's side, and then now we're going to hear Rachel's backstory, and then them getting together and that kind of thing.
The last episode, the end of Tom's story just really kind of fired me up, man.
Yeah,
I was just telling Tom, I was like, the Holy Spirit is here, man, because I'm feeling it. I was just like buzzing, so
yeah,
that pumped me up.
Just seeing how God works in our lives and what he does for us. It's awesome.
What a testimony for sure.
So let's get into this. Rachel, what's your story?
Yeah, it's interesting how God brings two people together to be married with completely separate, different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Whittier until about 8 years. My parents had 3 daughters.
What area? Whittier's big.
Mulberry and Painter.
So this is like, okay. So this is like Uptown almost.
Almost.
Yeah, because I lived, actually, I
there.
think it's like Uptown Whittier.
Yeah, we lived in Uptown for a little while. We lived off Friends. Do you know that? There was a Bob's Big Boy off of Painter.
Really? Oh, yeah, I know that there
was. It was a long
was.
time ago. Like close to there.
I grew up in Uptown Whittier for part of my life, and so I was all over, but...
Yeah, so grew up there, the oldest of 3. Spirituality, Christianity was always a part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
My parents went to a really solid church in Fullerton, mega church. That's kind of where my comfort zone lies.
What church was it?
It was
EV Free?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
EV Free Fullerton. Chuck Swindoll's church, and he was just an
Chuck.
amazing teacher, and just all of the programs and the Sunday school teachers, and it was just a fun place to grow up. It was just solid teaching, and my dad always had solid teachers in his background. He listened to R.C. Sproul and Hugh Ross and Zig Ziglar, and just really, really solid biblically teachers. And he wanted to be a Bible teacher, actually. And so he taught Sunday school there, and because they had 3 daughters so young, he couldn't really pursue that. So he worked in the trucking industry for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
Here in La Mirada, GI Trucking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was a
Club GI.
Yeah.
My brother, when he was out of high school, worked there.
Oh, really?
Just unloading trucks or something like that.
Yeah,
But he used to call it Club GI.
Yeah, he was there for a while. He was a quality assurance manager, so he was very organized. He managed managers. He was a good manager, so he kind of managed us as kids. That's kind of how we grew up. We were kind of, we had little coins that he would give us for chores and stuff. And, being the oldest, I very much took on the oldest child role. Very responsible, listened. They were super, super young, like I said, when they had us. And I know my mom had some depression issues when we were little. And so that kind of turned into me kind of being almost like a surrogate spouse to my dad and a surrogate mom to my sisters almost.
When did you notice that?
I didn't know that till I was older.
Okay.
I think I was probably 7 or 8 when that started. I had given my life to Christ when I was 7. And I remember there was kind of an urgency to it. I remember feeling like this was urgent. We have to do it now. And I remember calling my mom into the bedroom, and she prayed the prayer with me.
Oh, you did it at home.
Yeah,
that's
I did
cool.
it at home. And we had gone to a private Christian school as well. So I was very I knew what was going on. I knew biblically that I was a sinner. I needed a savior. And the only way to do that was to follow Christ.
So as a 7-year-old, you understood that.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think about that because I was young too. I was maybe 5 or 6 when my dad prayed the prayer with me, but it was by my choice, and I remember knowing and as much as you can as a young kid, but I knew what it was, like you're talking about the truths of the scripture and,
Totally.
and making that decision on your own.
Totally.
Yeah.
And my dad wasn't home. I think he was working nights during that time on the dock at GI Trucking. and he came home, and I just remember him being so excited. And we read the Bible together, like every single night. I mean, and he had not as much knowledge as he does now, but he had a lot of context, a lot of history. He knew Greek, he knew some parts of Greek. And so he would tell me the Greek definitions to stuff. So I really got, like, very young, a solid understanding of the Bible and who God was and what he could do and who how he could work through people, any kind of a person. It didn't matter who you were or where you came from. He could use you for his kingdom and his glory.
Right.
And so very young, that was instilled. And I had a pretty chill childhood. I mean, my parents, there were some fighting, but I remember them going to counseling and really trying to be better. They both came from divorced families, and I knew that they didn't want that for their kids.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to be together. They wanted their family. And so they worked really, really hard to work on themselves and to work with us with the best possible thing that they did. So in Whittier, we stayed there until I think 89. And then we moved to La Habra. I think I was in 4th grade when I moved to La Habra.
Which is a neighboring city of Whittier.
Yeah.
So isn't it, you weren't moving
it wasn't
far.
super far,
Yeah.
but it was a bigger house. We ended up stopped going to private school. There were some issues with the church that was attached to the school. The church was kind of charismatic, and it was kind of bleeding into the school a little bit. And my dad was just not his thing. He was really more non-denominational. And
Yeah, I'd be concerned if teachers were handing my kids rattlesnakes too. Sorry. I digress.
It was not quite that bad, but my dad is pretty, he believes strongly. He has very strong beliefs, and so that was just not what he wanted.
Just veering
his
off
kids.
a little bit too
Yes,
much. Sure.
Yes.
Sounds like your dad was pretty wise.
My dad was wise. He was saved when he was like 17. And he ran with it. I mean, he had a very strong, vivid spiritual experience with God and conversion, and he was extremely committed to that. And really wanted to go into ministry, but had us so young that that just didn't.
Raising a family.
Yeah, he was raising a family, so he couldn't really do that. So moved to La Habra. And the transition from private school to public school was so interesting. Like I remember kids talking about things and just being so naive and not knowing anything. And just, that transition was like, I really remember feeling very out of place, not having that spirituality attached to school. I mean, it was around me all the time. I mean, go to church, school, spirituality all the time. So I remember that being an interesting transition.
Like not praying before class,
right?
Because I've sat in with my daughter goes to, like, she's homeschooled, but she goes to a private school a couple times a week, and they pray before class and stuff. And I'm like, wow, how cool is that? And it's awesome. But public school, that's a no. It's like that's not happening.
And your friends are different. Your friends don't pray. You don't know who the Christians are really. I mean, they're not like super out there. So junior high, when I went to junior high, that was an awesome. Went to Rancho Starbuck Junior High with Nick, your cousin, and
Just go ahead and thank Nick for putting this together.
thanks, Nick. We love you.
This episode is dedicated to Nick.
Here you go, brother. This one's for you.
And love junior high. Like I said, I always kind of felt like out of my element, and I remember diving into sports in junior high and just loving that world. I mean, I think
What sports?
Oh my gosh, did everything. I literally cross country, volleyball, soccer, basketball, track,
Wow.
softball, and then we would do intramural sports during lunch, and then we would do like PE. So it was literally like sports all day. It was awesome. I loved junior high. And went to a bunch of church camps during junior high and like rededicated my life. I remember that's just where I was. Like I remember finding $1 at junior high and turning it into the office to see if somebody had lost this dollar. Like
That's the right thing to
That's where
do.
I was, like that's where I was in junior high. and went to high school, and it was totally different. It was all political. It was about who you know. It was about what you do. It's about who your car and what you look like and I mean, it was totally different world. And that was not my favorite. I did not enjoy high school at all. I basically thought, I'm just going to try to survive this and stay away from me and don't talk to me and don't look at me. And I was involved a little bit in sports. I played volleyball and 1 year of water polo, and I was a swimmer, and that was kind of my saving grace.
But you had no interest in being like in the in crowd or being with the cool kids.
No. I was already cool, so I didn't
That was cool
really
enough.
have a desire to hang out with.
Well, I think you had an identity in
Right.
Christ.
Yeah, I
you
did.
knew you had
Yeah.
your confidence. You had God. You didn't need any of that
Yeah.
crap. Like your husband was saying, and I suffer from the same thing. Like we needed love, we needed acceptance, we needed all this stuff because we were lacking in from our home life or whatever, and so you start to seek that acceptance and doing whatever you to get that, and so you were good.
Yeah, I really was. And I remember kind of during that time, I had already kind of become like a little bit of a surrogate mom, and my sisters were in high school with me. And I do remember my dad saying, take care of your sisters, that maybe he didn't say that, but it was very much implied that I needed to look after my sisters and take care of them.
Right.
And so I took that job very seriously. I mean, my dad was a serious dude, and I took him seriously. And so I tried to do that. And, I remember just being hypersensitive to anybody when they were talking about my sisters in any kind of way, that you be respectful and you be careful, or you're going to get your butt kicked.
What was the age difference?
A year apart. Like we were.
So you guys
freshmen,
were all in high
sophomore.
school
Yeah,
together.
we were all
Okay.
in high school together for 2 years.
So you were able to keep a real good eye on them.
Well, some of the time I tried. I did my best.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if you don't mind me asking. So
Yeah.
your mom just wasn't capable of
My
or
mom
able to.
had depression issues
Yeah.
when we were really young. She had a suicide attempt. I think we were 4 or 5.
Oh,
We
wow.
didn't know about that until we were older. But she had a really hard time with depression, and my dad kind of tried to just pick up those pieces and tried to just be, the emotional stability.
Try to take the pressure off of
Exactly.
her.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And so, and that just kind of continued. My mom's an artist. She's kind of she really loves art, and she didn't get to do that for most of our lives, really, with that outlet. And her mom, her mom was not the most emotionally stable person either. And so, she did the best that she could with what she had.
Right.
She did better for us than her mom did for her.
Yeah.
Counseling as far as like trying to get better, and good churches and good teachers and stuff like that, private school. But yeah, I took that role, and I probably took it a little farther than I needed to. I remember when I was 17, my dad asked me, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I said, I thought about it, and I said, I want to be a mom.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like I really, really, really want to be a mom. Like I really didn't have, I want to do this better than my mom, kind of attitude. And my mom was a great mom, but everybody has their stuff. And he said, okay, well, if you want to be a mom, then you need to go learn how to cook, and you need to learn how to wash clothes, and you need to learn how to sew. Learn how to do the things that a mom would do.
Tom just gave a fist pump for that one. Sounds like you're doing a good job, Rachel.
Thanks. So I did. So when I was 18, I went to culinary school in Fullerton, and loved that. I had been working at Norm's off Whittier Boulevard.
I love Nord. That was our family restaurant right
Yeah, and I worked
24
there.
hours.
Yeah, we never closed. And that was, I loved it. It very much felt like a sport to me. It was like you have team members and you do all these things in order to accomplish, serving these people this food hot
Right,
and do it in a great way. And so I loved that like team
I
aspect.
just realized that the service over there is really good. Like,
Oh my
because the
gosh.
place will get packed and you'll
They
get in and get out, and and
You
your
get taken
food is
care
always
of.
good. Yeah.
Best servers ever.
Just realized
I've
that.
worked in the service industry for 12 years, and they were amazing. To be the first job that I ever had to be there set me
perfect
up
for-
so well.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
unofficial sponsor of One Story Podcast, Norm's Restaurant. Come get your breakfast 24 hours a day. We never close.
Oh my gosh. So that kind of culinary school led, that fit with the restaurant business that I was already doing really, really well.
Right. Yeah.
And so I had worked there. I had worked at a couple of restaurants in La Mirada as I was going to culinary school, graduated by this time, high school, non-eventful, very non-eventful high school career, which I'm perfectly fine with. Went into management after, I think it was 19 when I started managing restaurants. So I was pretty young and I was making good money. And I had already started to kind of drink by this time. My first beer was like 13 years old, and it was like a warm Budweiser in my pantry that my uncle had brought over, and I had been eyeballing it for like 2 months. And I asked my dad one day, I'm like, hey, can I drink that beer? And he was like, sure, thinking, she's going to hate it.
Yeah.
And I took it outside because I couldn't drink it inside. And I pounded it. I drank the whole thing.
Did you know what beer did? Did you know the purpose of it?
I knew that there was an effect that came with alcohol, and I was looking for that effect.
Right.
And so I drank it really fast, and he was like, "How was it?" And I was like, "It was fine. Like it was it didn't do anything." And that's what I was kind of like.
Rachel's hardcore. I couldn't even chug beer in high school. It was always rough.
I know Coors Light. It was just like,
Like, I'm good, bro. I'm good. This is great. Rachel, 13 years old, is shotgunning it.
then Isaac pulled out the Boone's Farm, or what is it? Isaac with wine coolers.
That was a little rough too.
It's funny.
Sorry, Rachel.
So no, that's okay. So I was kind of bummed that I didn't get the effect. So at 17, right before we graduated high school, I was
sorry.
determined.
What was so you were actually looking to catch a buzz?
Yes.
Feel
Was
the
there
effect.
people in your family that drank, or I know it doesn't sound like your dad or your mom
No, and that was what was interesting is my mom and dad both were raised by single mothers, and so neither of my grandfathers were involved in our lives really. So we didn't really know that much about them until I was older, and I figured out my dad's dad was like into cocaine and into cartels and into old gangs in LA, and
Interesting.
didn't take care of himself very well, and did some, had some substance abuse problems. And my other grandfather, my mom's dad, drank heavily, and his family owned a bar, and that was their lifestyle. And so I don't know if my parents intentionally hid that or just had no desire to really talk about that stuff with their kids, which I totally understand.
Right.
But
Just at 5 years old. Here, sit down. Sit down, Rachel.
Yeah.
We need to talk about something here now.
yeah. So I wasn't really aware. We weren't aware. I wasn't aware of that for a while. And when I was 17, my parents went on an anniversary trip, and I had asked my aunt to get us some. I want tequila, and she was like, "No, you can have wine coolers. I'll get you some wine coolers or whatever." And I'm like, "Mm-mm." So I'm like, "Okay, thanks, anyways." And we went to one of the markets and asked somebody to buy us
Hey, mister.
a bottle of tequila. Yep. And that night I had 6 shots in 30 minutes, and I was intent on feeling that effect. And I did, and I blacked out, and I threw up, and I went to sleep. And the next morning I loved it and wanted to do it all over again.
Wow.
It was it was my first love. That was my first love, was alcohol.
And you were still involved in church.
Absolutely.
Did you feel
Absolutely.
guilty for that?
I
or no?
didn't. By that time I had kind of felt like I deserve, I was good for so long. I deserve.
And not only that, you were doing
You'd let
like
your
you
hair
said,
down a little bit.
Right.
Not only that, you're doing a lot at home as far as watching over your sisters. So
Yeah, I mean that came into play a little bit later. There had been some stuff that happened to my sisters, and I think I was 21. I'll get to that in a minute. But managing restaurants, that industry is very easy for alcoholics to
Function.
engage in their lifestyle the way they want to when you work in the restaurant industry. And so that's what I did. I worked really, really hard and I drank. And I didn't party, I drank. So my friends would get handlebars of rum and we would go get some Coke and we would go to somebody's house or get a hotel room and drink. It was never social. It was never for fun. I would prefer to just drink alone. And when I was 21, that's what I was so excited about. I wasn't excited about, woohoo, it was like, I get to go to a bar by myself. Like that was my excitement about being a 21-year-old girl in Orange County, was that I could go to a bar by myself.
Wow.
Interesting.
So, but those are the friends that I spent time with. So
Right.
to me, it didn't seem out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
To me, it seemed like that's just the way everybody drinks.
Because you've seen it. You probably had customers or whatever. You see people doing that, so it wasn't abnormal.
The customers I had weren't really. It was like an Italian restaurant. The restaurant I was managing at the time was an Italian restaurant, and people wouldn't get like sloshy drunk. I mean, it wasn't a bar. It was a nice place. It was in
Okay.
Brea.
So, you were just saying that was shaped by the other people that you hung out with, because they were the same way. It wasn't like, let's go to the party with, hundreds of people getting drunk and partying. It was,
Right.
like you said.
I mean, I found my people. I knew
Right.
that I didn't want to go socialize. I mean, Tom has a totally different story. He liked to go because he had FOMO and he didn't want to miss out on anything and he wanted to go party. And that was like totally different experience than mine.
Yeah, I
Mine was
gotcha.
like,
Tom, did you ever just scream FOMO?
FOMO wasn't a thing back then. It was only a feeling. An unspoken feeling.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I scream YOLO all the time. My wife gets annoyed by it.
I can
She's
see
like,
that.
we need to go to the donut shop. She's like, no, we just had donuts the other day. YOLO, babe. YOLO.
oh my God, I might punch you if you're my husband.
Wait, what? Drew, can we switch seats?
A little too close.
So yeah, where was I?
So before 21, or you were looking forward to 21 so
Oh,
you can
yes,
drink
yes,
alone.
Yes. And I opened another restaurant during that time. I think I was 20 when I opened we opened a Chinese concept in Brea with the same owners, and trained all the staff and it was a great opening. It was a great place. It was really fun to do at that age. It was really, really fun industry to be in. And then I started general managing at the Italian restaurant again because the manager had gotten let go. And so I was 21 and I was general managing a restaurant. It was a $2 million a year restaurant. I was making good money. And I had been dating a guy and we had gotten engaged. And I was very much in the place of like no sex before marriage. Like I'm
still
gonna
in
get
church?
married.
At this point, you're still in church?
I mean, it wasn't like an every week thing. I still had my faith. 100%. I never
Okay.
ever really lost my faith, but there were definitely times where I would take my will back. I would take my will away from God. I wanted to do what I wanted to do.
Right.
And I do this a lot. I always say church. Like, do you grow up in the church? And that's just a easy way of saying, did you know God for
Totally.
me? Just for
God never left, but I definitely was like, I deserve to do what I want to do. Like, that's where I was. I was really like wanting to do my will instead of God's will. And that's just not smart. It's not wise. And I think you learn that over time. And I think, as a believer growing up, you learn, when God tells you, reel it in, chick. Like, you got to reel this in. And he did that around 22, 23. My parents kicked me out because I was like not in a good place, just drinking a lot. I had broken up with that ex-fiance. I had actually met Tom. We started hanging out a little bit in 2001 and I started to have feelings for him. And I thought, I can't get married if I'm having feelings for somebody else. Like, this is bad. So we broke that off. And I remember that using that as like an excuse to just party. or drink.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the same time, both my sisters were going through some traumas, and I very much felt responsible for them. And I remember them we were all laying down in bed, and one of them was on my right hand side and the other was on my left hand side, and they held my arms, and they were just telling me all these traumas of what was going on in their lives. And I just fell apart. Like I cried. I was just like, this is the worst thing ever. I failed. I failed at the only thing that I really thought that I could do. And if this is a precursor of me being a mother, like how great. And that just, my drinking after that just went even worse. It was a lot. At 22, my parents kicked me out. They were just like, we can't do this with you anymore. Like, I had broken into their house at one point accidentally. Like, I didn't know that I had a key to their house. I was living somewhere else, and I went into the house, and they thought an animal had like got into the house somehow, because I was stumbling, because it didn't even sound like footprints.
Oh, wow.
Like, I was stumbling so bad, and they called the cops, and thank God their gun was in another room. They like had to open their window. They had to climb out of their bedroom window, and they had to go to the neighbor's house, call the cops.
Wow.
The cops came. Thank God his shotgun was in the other room, because he probably would have shot me. Like, they really genuinely thought like they were being broken into.
Yeah.
And so the cops find me, and they tell my parents there's an unresponsive female in this bedroom. And my parents were like, oh my gosh, some vagrant woman like broke into our home and sleeping in
Right. Wow. And
I literally remember being so drunk. I opened my eyes and I just see a flashlight, and I just went back to sleep, and I passed out. And I remember my parents coming into the room like crying, like so upset, like, are you okay? What happened? Like, just put myself in some really bad positions, where I would drink alone at bars, and I would allow people to take me home. And, God protected me in some ways during that time, but in other ways, I mean, I was raped during that time. And like,
Wow.
you put yourself in situations and things happen, like darkness is real, like Satan is real, and he will use whatever it takes to try to bring you down and destroy you and destroy your family. And he absolutely taught me a lot during those times. And so, after that is when they kind of kicked me out of the house. And
so you're in the depths of all this, and then on top, kind of on top of it, it's like now.
And they just didn't know what to do. Like, they didn't have any experience with addiction at all. And my mom said one time, she was like, to my dad, she's like, I think Rachel's an alcoholic. And my dad was like, no way, not Rachel. Like, no way. Like, I was his oldest, I was his confidant, I was his,
You were the good child.
Right. And so he just did not believe that for a long time. I still think he kind of struggles with it a little bit. But I lived out of my car. I did a little bit of couch surfing as well for 2 months and lost like 20 pounds, which does not look good on me. And people thought I was like on methamphetamines. I mean, that's how thin and like emaciated I looked.
Was that from just the stress? And
I think that, and like I would rather drink than eat. Like, if I had money, if I was able to get some money or scrounge up money from somewhere, I would rather drink than eat. Like, that's where.
Did you have your job still at this time?
I did have a job. I had a different job. I quit my managing job because I wanted to leave more room for drinking.
Wow.
Like, I literally was like, I need more time.
Did you have any idea that you had a problem at that time?
No.
Because that should.
I really didn't. Yeah. I think because of the friends, that I had, and because they drank that way, it seemed normal to me. And looking back over my life, I was always attracted to alcoholics or addicts. Like, seeing the friends that I had as a kid, I was always attracted to this certain type of person that ended up being an alcoholic or an addict.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had a job, and then I actually lost some money at that job. Like, you hold all your cash, and at the end of the night you turn all your cash in. Well, I had lost like $500 that night, and they ended up firing me because they thought I was a tweaker. I was super skinny, and they thought, oh my gosh, this girl's
stealing
like,
from us.
Yeah, totally. So which I totally understand, So that was kind of like the end of like me being able to support myself and living out of my car. And I ended up coming back home, and my parents said, you have to be sober. Like, you have to stay sober. And I was like, okay, I will try. I will try to be sober. And I was sober for 9 months. I got 2 jobs. I worked my butt off, but I remember feeling so hopeless, like so anxious, so hopeless, so depressed, and not even being able to like really hold a conversation with like a friend or family member. It was just really hard for me to function in life. And I remember asking my parents, can I get my wisdom teeth taken out? And I wanted the Vicodin. That was the whole purpose of getting my wisdom teeth taken out.
It's hardcore.
Was to get some Vicodin. And I remember making it last as long as I could. I'd crush it up. I mean, it was just like, it was so bad.
Yeah.
Like, it was so bad.
Yeah.
And, we can't, as an alcoholic and an addict, we can't function in life without that's our medicine. Our medicine is alcohol or drugs. And that's where I was. And so I went into this kind of what they call in recovery, they call it a dry drunk. It's when you don't drink, but you don't replace it with any kind of spirituality or recovery. And so that's where I was for 9 months. And that is not a good place to be. And I remember feeling super depressed one day, and I was sitting on the couch, and my sister and my mom were about to leave, and nobody else was home. And I was like, I wonder, maybe I should just try to see what it would feel like to like hang myself in the closet. And I was gonna try, just see like if it hurt. If it hurts too bad, maybe not. And I remember I was sitting on the couch, and my mom looks at me, and she was like, Rachel, are you having suicidal thoughts? And I literally was like, yes. And I was so stunned that she knew exactly what I was thinking. And she was like, come with me. And so I went with her and my sister. My sister was doing like a school project at the time. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't do this to my family. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
So I didn't. I took those thoughts out of my mind. And I remember a couple months later, she was like, you're doing so good. You're being sober. You're doing so good. Have some wine. And she gave me wine. And I remember taking that wine and feeling like everything was going to be okay. Like, it went down, and I felt total peace. I felt like I could do life again. I could talk to people again. And that was in December. And by May, I was a mess. I had started hanging out with this girl who was super sweet, but she was kind of my excuse to get to go out and drink. And I was hiding it from my parents. And then I met a guy, and I started living with this guy, and lost my virginity, which was super important to me. And was like, it was.
And this is like mid-20s.
This was 22.
Okay, so
almost 23.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
23. And that to me was like you lose your virginity. That's it. Like, you're a terrible, like, this is the worst thing ever. Like, that was supposed to be a gift to my husband. Like, it was like devastating. And, I remember I wasn't living with my parents, but I remember having contact with them, and they started talking to me about rehab. And I was just like, no, sorry, there's no way. I'm now I have to marry this guy. Like, I lost my virginity to him. We have to get married. This is him. This is the guy, clearly. And I remember my aunt taking me to church. My aunt's only like 4 years older than me. And she took me to church one day, and I don't even remember. It was Morning Star. She took me to Morning Star. And I don't even remember what Pastor Jack was saying that day. But when I left, I knew I had to go to rehab, and rehab was in Arizona. And I went to my parents, and I was like, I think I need to go to rehab. And they were like, kind of like, is this real? Like, what is this? They were very skeptical of me. And so I went back to the apartment with the guy I was living with, and kind of told him what was going on. And he was kind of like, okay, like a little, I'll be back in 30 days. And he's just like, okay. And so I got on a plane. My parents literally, like, I just threw some clothes together, put me on a plane, took me to Arizona, June 26th of 2003. It's like
a little warm.
115. I'm wearing all black. I literally opened the doors open to this airport, and it feels like I'm literally standing into an oven.
Punches you in
And
the face, for sure.
I had never experienced anything like that. Born and raised in Southern California.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, what have I done?
It's a mistake.
What have I
Yeah.
got myself into? And so I'm driving with this man who picks me up in a van, and his name was James. He was amazing. And I just threw up on this man about my life and gosh, and got to rehab, and it was the best experience ever. It was amazing. It was a Christian rehab, and they had amazing counselors, and they took you through so many different aspects of the disease of alcoholism and addiction. And I had never heard any of this. I knew nothing about addiction. I knew nothing about alcoholism. And when they were defining what alcoholism was, I was like, oh my gosh, that is me.
Mm-hmm.
That is 100% me. And there was no cure. There's no cure to alcoholism. And they said, the only thing you can do is to keep it in remission. And the only way to keep it into remission is to be into meetings and to be in recovery, to have a spiritual solution, to give your life to God, your will, and that's the only way you're going to survive. You're either going to be dead, you're either going to go to jail, or you're going to end up in an insane asylum.
Wow.
And I absolutely believed that. I mean, I absolutely saw myself I could see myself. I mean, I got so many stories of God just sparing me from so much that I knew that was true. And I knew that if I kept drinking, I would for sure be dead. Because the last 2 months I was drinking all day, every day. I literally drank myself sober. I couldn't get drunk anymore. I probably would have turned to drugs because it wasn't working anymore. Like, that's how much I drank.
Wow.
At 23.
Yeah.
So imagine. They talked so much about grief. They talked so much about like your family, your origin of family, like what your family struggled with that kind of trickles down to you. And so it just made so much sense to actually put it on paper and see, these are the things that my family has dealt with, and these are the things that they've overcome, but it still can trickle down, and you can still be affected by it. Mm-hmm. And so that to me was like, I wasn't convinced I was going to stay sober, because I was like, I'm 23. Like, you're telling me I can't have alcohol for the rest of my life?
It's a long time.
It's like, and I couldn't imagine life without alcohol. I mean, I really couldn't.
Right.
And they told me, you don't have to imagine life without alcohol. You just have to imagine today without alcohol.
One day at a time.
Just one day at a time. Mm-hmm. And I believed them. I mean, people would come in from outside and bring in meetings to us, and they seemed joyful. They seemed genuinely at peace. They seemed to genuinely have serenity. And I believed them, and I believed that they, loved their life. And I thought, okay, well, I guess we'll try. And I decided to stay. My parents wanted me to go into a halfway house. That's what they suggested as aftercare. And I was trying to find a halfway house here because I had a boyfriend and who I was going to marry, because that was what was going to happen.
Were you guys engaged?
We were kind of. Like, we talked about marriage. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We weren't like officially.
He didn't give you the Cracker Jack box ring?
I did have a Cracker Jack box ring, actually. I actually did. But it wasn't like, I don't know. It wasn't like, we had talked about it, but it wasn't nothing.
You weren't feeling it.
I didn't
but
know
you just
what God,
felt.
I was feeling like God wanted me there. And that's really what I was doing. My focus was on God wanted, not what he wanted, and not what I wanted. I mean, it really was at that point, like, I've clearly screwed up my will.
Yourself to him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, I've clearly screwed up my will. Like, I wanted to do this. I wanted to drink. I want to do all this stuff. This needs to change. And he was really, I mean, it was all him. I mean, he gave me a tiny bit of willingness and I ran with it, but it really was all motivated by him, because I really could have gone into the throes of who knows what. And so I didn't find a halfway house here. Nobody was answering the phone. My parents couldn't get a hold of anybody here. So they had a halfway house there, and it was attached to the rehab, and I visited it. And when I walked in, it was like the most peaceful, clean, like it just felt so good to be in there. So I thought, okay, we'll try it. And so I go into the halfway house. I was there for a year. And it was like college. It was like college for life. I had a bunch of girls. We were all trying to figure out how to stay sober. We were all trying to figure out how to like process emotions when something happens and you don't know what to do. I mean, when you drink, when you're an alcoholic, you have something called arrested emotional growth, where you stop growing emotionally at the age that you start drinking alcoholically. So if I started drinking at 17 and now I was 23, I'm emotionally still 17. So I'm trying to figure out life emotionally as a 17-year-old.
Wow.
And so that if you're 40 or 50 and you just started drinking at 15, guess what? You have a lot of catching up to do.
I think I just had an epiphany. That kind of explains kind of like what Tom was saying. Me too. I think I kind of partying in high school, and then we were saying it's hard to grow up. I think you were just stuck in that period of time. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that was a big, huge, and that's what we were able to do. We were able to figure out, okay, how do you deal with this problem at work in an emotionally mature way with a spiritual solution, having the support that you have in
That's
recovery.
awesome.
So it was amazing. I went to meetings like almost every day and just learned how to give my life to God fully, like completely, fully trust him for every single tiny need I had. And when I first walked, it was like the second day I walked in that halfway house, I remember thinking in my brain, like, I need milk, I need to find a gym, like just, going over a list of things I needed. And I remember this girl came in and she was like, "Hey, Rachel, how are you?" And I was like, "I'm fine." She's like, "I'm going to the gym. There's a really great gym down the street. And there's some milk in the fridge if you need some milk."
That's crazy.
And I was literally like,
That is crazy.
"Oh my God." Like so vivid. Like God literally was so vivid with me during this time. Like he was shouting at me what to do next. And this was like on a daily basis, where to work.
Not only
Who to
that,
spend
it
time
sounds like
with.
he was letting you know I'm here.
He was fully there. I mean, in rehab, he had told me to stay. Like I had prayed. I was having a little bit of anxiety about the halfway house situation. And I had prayed, "God, what do you want?" I got on my knees, which I never do. I never get on my knees to pray. I'm like, "What do you want me to do?" And I'm like, "Do you want me to stay in Arizona?" And I hear this voice, but it was my voice. It was really loud in my head. Like, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." And I was like, I stood up and I was freaking out. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I think that was you, but I don't know. Just give me another sign." And I opened the window and there's these, like, they have monsoons in Arizona, which I've never experienced before. And there's like these flashes of lightning. I'm like, "Okay, I'll stay." "Okay, I'll stay." "Sorry, I will stay." So that's really what, I mean, every step of the he was motivating everything. And so I'm in this halfway house and we're going to this church that's close by, and it's a big church. And so I'm comfortable there. And one day there was this missionary talking about China. And he was like, hundreds of thousands of people die every day in China who've never heard the name of Jesus Christ. And it felt like somebody was like pushing my lungs and my heart from the inside out, and tears started coming down. Like there was no welling up. It was like this automatic experience. And one of my girlfriends kind of like, "What's going on?" Well, I had another person that was in the halfway house on the other side of the church, huge church, go to the halfway house that night. And she's like, "Rachel, when that missionary was talking about China, I totally thought of you. I totally thought that would be something that you would like to do." And I was like, "No, like I just got sober. What are you talking about? I'm not going anywhere." Like they were passing out Bibles in Thailand to Chinese vacationers. So you can't get Bibles in China.
Right. Yeah.
So they would pass them out in Thailand. And so I was like, "I don't think so. Like that's not something I do." Well, it kept coming up. Like different things kept coming up. Like the whole car thing. Like I started noticing China everywhere. Right. And I'm just like, "Lord, I'm really, please no." Like, cause I'm at the point where I'm like, "I will do whatever you want. Please don't send me to Thailand." Like that's not my plan. And, so I opened my Bible one day and I'm just like, "Okay, just give, I just would do this. I would just open it and just point." And I pointed, I think it's in Matthew, and it says, "Healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do."
Yeah.
I was just like, "Okay, Lord, well, maybe I'll just go to the meeting. I'll go to the meeting and I'll see, I'll talk to the people and I'll see how it feels." And it was really great and they were really sweet, but you had to raise a bunch of money and you had to get like 2 weeks off. So I go to my boss, and I'm working in the restaurant industry again in sobriety. And I asked my boss, "Hey, would you just let me have 2 weeks off for go to Thailand. He's like, yes, I totally would. I'm like, oh, great. Oh, God. Okay.
So you don't have that out.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll try. I had to write these letters and tell people what you're doing.
Were you
try to
just
raise money.
afraid of leaving the halfway house because of your sobriety? Did you feel like your sobriety was in jeopardy?
No, I thought God was going to send me to be a missionary. And
you didn't want to be a missionary.
I
scared of-
totally
yeah,
would
yeah.
go because I knew that I would go. If he really wanted me to go, I would go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started sending out letters and money started coming in and I needed like $500 more. And I got a letter from my dad. My dad was very frugal when we were growing up. He just never spent a lot of money on anything. And there was a check for $500. Wow. And I called him and I was like, oh my gosh, Dad, like, how did you know? How did you know that's like the exact amount of money that I needed? And he was like, I just kept hearing that amount in my head. He just I kept praying and I just kept hearing that amount in my head. And I was just like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to Thailand. Great.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible.
So I go to Thailand and of course it's amazing. And the food is amazing. The people are amazing. And I have these Bibles in Chinese and I'm handing them out to Chinese vacationers. They've never seen a Bible in their whole life. And I'm handing it to them. And it's just like, you learn a few things in Chinese and try to communicate a little bit. But I mean, it was really just more of like getting it into their hands and getting them into the country. And the missionary, who was amazing. His wife was Thai and he spoke the language and he was learning Mandarin at the time. And he says to me, so Rachel, what's your deal? Like, do you go to school? Like, what's your deal? And I was like, oh, like I live in a halfway house and I'm a recovering alcoholic. And he looked at me and he's like, you need to come back here. And I was like, whoa, no. You don't know what it took for me to get here in the first place. I don't think that's no. And he was like, well, Rachel, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do.
Whoa. That's what got you there in the first place.
And I was like, literally the same feeling of me being pushed from the inside, my heart and my lungs, and tears, just automatic. And he was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's not you. It's not you.
It's the Holy Spirit.
And he was like, will you come back? And I was like, yes, I'll come back. And I came back like 6 months later on a long-term volunteer basis. I was there for a month and I had a car and I had an apartment and I had a phone and I had my responsibility was taking boxes of Bibles in Mandarin to different sites around the city that we were in. We were in Pattaya, which is about an hour and a half south on the Gulf of Thailand. And it was the best. It was amazing. I mean, God just, knew that I would be, that would be, it was totally my type of a ministry, like something I'd never thought I would ever do. And I got back from Thailand in February. I was there from January to February, and on Valentine's Day in February, the missionary had taken us out to dinner and he was like, Rachel, you're so charming. Why aren't you married yet?
Thanks.
I was like, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. He's like, oh, well, who can we set you up with? And I'm like, it's cool.
Yeah.
And, and so that night, it was like in my head, like, why am I not married? Like, God was just like messy. I was just like, my head is thanks. Now I'm in my head about not being married.
Right.
And in recovery, we're taught that expectations are premeditated resentments. Like if you have an expectation, you're setting yourself up for pain. Don't do that. And so I hear God tell me to like make a list of the guy. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not doing that. And I couldn't sleep. This was like 11 o'clock. I can hear me make a list. I'm like, no, Lord, I'm not doing that. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, finally 3 o'clock in the morning. I have to be up passing out Bibles at 8 o'clock the next day. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll write this list because you're not going to let me go to sleep. And I sat down on the top of the list. I wrote the date and I said, I do not want to write this. And I just started writing attributes of people, of a man.
That
That I didn't even know. I very specific attributes. I mean, I think I put capitalistic on one of them and I'm like, I don't even know if that's a word. Is that even an attribute? Like, what is that? Like, very specific attributes of a man. And I literally folded it up and I never looked at it again. I was like, there, fine, I did it. And
did you go right to sleep?
I did. I totally did. He let me go to sleep. I was so like irritated. And so I got back from Thailand like a week after that, and that was in February. Well, in April, I get a call from him, from Tom, and we had gone to high school together.
We call him Walter around here.
Yeah, from Walter, and we ended up talking for like 5 hours. And I told him my whole recovery story. I told him about Thailand. I told him about all this stuff. And that's when I was saying, like, God has done all this. And he was like, no, you've done it. Give yourself some credit.
Okay.
Not understanding, that world. And so he's like, he comes to Arizona. He has a spiritual experience. And he had seen me drinking a lot during those years. And so when he put his head on my shoulder in the previous episode, I told him, I said, I'm really glad that you got a chance to see my life now, like have a really good life. I'm really glad you got a chance to experience it. And he was so solemn and so somber. And that's when he was praying, take her out of my life. And he got back on the plane. He went home. He called me the next day. I got to see all of this incredible stuff that God was doing in his life. Conversion, answering prayer, we were both on like such a high. We like, and so in July we started dating. And so he would come back and forth to Arizona. It was long distance. And in July I grabbed my list. I said, look, I wrote this in February and I don't even remember what's on it, but will you read it for me? And he's like, this is a pretty specific list. And I read it again. I'm like, oh, it was like 95% Tom.
Really?
Yes.
And then the other 5%, I'll fit into it.
Yeah. It was like kind of, but it was pretty.
God was still working on me. The other 5% still with me.
Amen, brother.
But it felt very like, oh my gosh, God is telling me this is my dude. This is my guy. Like I was absolutely 100% believed that he was him. And I was like, okay.
What when you had invited him to visit you,
I didn't invite him.
I invited myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I said, I'm going to come visit you. And she's like, yeah, whatever.
You just said, okay.
I had told my mom, I said, Mom, God is bringing this guy to Arizona and he is not a Christian. And I don't know why he's allowing him to come, but you need to pray for me because
pray against it.
Yeah. Because we had spent time together before. Like I had feelings for him.
Oh, so there was a little bit of
there was something.
Okay.
So I was like, Mom,
Sorry. In 2001, I actually told one of my good friends that if I ever dated her, I would marry her.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Anyways.
I seen that eye roll. I play on a daily basis from my wife.
Yeah.
No, that's funny.
And so it just, if you knew both of us in high school, you would never put us together, like ever, ever, ever.
Well, because you were quiet, or you were like, he was like with the cool kids, and then you were doing your thing.
I guess you could call them that. As far as the culture was concerned, I guess you could call them that.
Now that you're married to him, you're like, you're not that cool.
That's funny.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay.
I tend to do that
because he kind of represented. I mean, not so much, but just that other lifestyle.
Yeah, totally.
And you didn't know where that would fit in with you.
I wouldn't shut the door on what God, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm so open to God using whoever to do whatever. Right. But it was like, you need to pray because I don't know what's going to happen.
It's hard to discern sometimes too, though. But
Discerning
not to say
spirits.
that.
Discerning spirits is actually like my number one spiritual gift. We
Oh,
did a
really?
spiritual gifts test, and discerning spirits was like number one, which I was really interested in. We did that at church.
So what do you think
recently,
about One Story Podcast?
I like
No, I'm
One
just
Story
kidding.
Podcast. Else I wouldn't be here. So when he was getting his ticket to go later, I was on the phone with my mom, and I started crying. I had dropped him off, and I was like, "Mom, I don't know why God sent him out here. Like, we had such a great time, but I know I could never date him. He's not a believer." And she's, we're talking and he literally calls me. He's like, "Come pick me up." And that's when we went to church. I mean, it was literally God was
Wow.
just like, boom, boom,
That's
boom,
why
boom,
you were
boom,
still
boom,
in the party.
boom, boom.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Okay.
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is sick.
So in July, we see that we both look at the list. He had already, I think, had a ring ready.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was not a Cracker Jack box.
No,
this
it
is
was
legit.
not.
It was a hand-me-down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which is even more legit, I think. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we went and we were like watching fireworks, and I just remember both of us feeling like affirmation, like we're gonna do this. Like we're gonna get married. Like this is crazy. So
beautiful.
him and my sister and his sister and my family, both my sisters were kind of in the event industry at the time. They whipped up a wedding like you could not believe in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And we got married so fast.
Dang.
So he came to Arizona in April, and we were married by August 28th or 26th.
I came to April 12th or May 12th.
May.
I came to Arizona on May 12th, and we were married August 26th.
That's beautiful.
Like super fast.
awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good story, but like our first
It's an
year
amazing story.
of our first year of marriage was absolute hell.
Yeah, I always joke and say that it was the worst year of my life. and as we know, I was abused as a child. No, I'm just kidding. I wasn't really abused. But I had a pretty tumultuous childhood, and it was the worst year of my life. My
Wow.
first year of marriage. But the amazing thing about God and just what He does inside of you is the growth that you experience, especially through marriage and becoming one. He really does whittle you down and develop one out of two, and sometimes that means there's a lot of pain involved in a
lot of other stuff to cut away.
exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to cut away.
Yeah.
We were not equally yoked. Like she was so much more advanced than I was, and I was a baby Christian coming into this with somebody that had grown up in the church, and she took a shot on me, and maybe God tricked her. I don't know, probably.
I felt like God tricked me. I legit was like, God, why? Like what happened? Like you affirmed this so much, and
Yeah.
it was very intense. Like Tom's background was like kind of a verbally, assaulting kind of a background.
I definitely, even in Christ, still having that old life and everything that I knew on coping mechanisms. It was cry, fight, or yell. Right. It was those are my three options. There wasn't a talking option in there. I didn't know
Right.
what talking was. It was completely foreign to me.
And I had been in recovery, so I had been learning how to grieve and
Yeah.
like shame and like all of this great spiritual work. So I was very like in a judgmental kind of pious place. Like you need to do this, and you need to get in recovery, and you need to do
Because you know how it works.
because I knew that there was I knew there was codependency. I knew there was brokenness, but I just went about it in a very judgmental way, like very self-righteous, very judgmental, very arrogant way.
Right.
And it just did not go over well at all. God, we literally had to, I was like, I'm going to go to counseling. And I'm like, and he was like, no, I'm not going. And I remember like, okay, well, I'm going to go without you. This is where I'm meeting. This is what time we're meeting at. If you'd like to join me, this is where I'll be.
And I literally sat there digging my heels in. There's no way I'm walking into a counseling office. and about 15 minutes go by, and I'm like, she's probably on her way down there. She's going to be all alone talking to the counselor. And I'm like, he's going to hear one side of this story. There's no way I'm going to let her do this by herself. I'm going to go down there and set them straight. Tell them exactly what's going on.
Yeah. So God tricked him into counseling.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And we ended up getting into a newly married couples group with other newly marrieds and with a leader.
Through your
the
church? Okay.
Through East Valley Bible Church. Yeah.
So
as a
you
result of
moved.
that
Oh,
meeting.
I'm sorry. So you moved back to.
Yeah, so we got married.
They got married in August,
August
and then they were
26th.
living in Phoenix.
I moved
Or-
here September 1st. So it will be from yeah. So from May 12th when I came out here, I was living here by September 1st, or not here. Sorry,
there,
in
Arizona.
There, yeah,
Arizona.
I forgot where I'm at. We're inside. We don't ever go.
I got
outside
confused
in
for a second
we
there. I
don't-
was like, wait.
we don't go outside in Arizona, so inside always looks like Arizona.
Turn the air on.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, so I mean, it was a
Okay.
whirlwind. Like, you know, we definitely moved fast, and
Even for you, because you're in a whole new
oh yeah,
state, you know, and
New
whole
Christian.
new state,
Hard-
whole new everything. Friends, like everybody thought I was completely crazy.
And to the point too, you were saying like as a new Christian, and you still had whatever. Like we're still the same people that we have to. God shapes us. It's not like you get saved and then you're Jesus. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
Or you're like Jesus. Like we're working towards that, and
Towards
so all of
Christ likeness.
yeah, exactly. So
I mean,
yeah.
for me, it took me years to let that part of my life go. It was so hard.
Yeah.
Because it is like developing that relationship and knowing more to help you help guide your walk. It's hard.
It
you know?
is,
So
like-
it is tough to kind of shed that part of your life.
There
It
were
was
t-
for me at least. It
there-
doesn't have to be like that.
for
but it
me
was
as
for
well. There were times where, you know, we would count down, or I would count down in my head. I'm like, dude, it's been like 3 days since I've yelled, right? And then it's like, dude, it's been like 2 weeks since I've yelled. And then I would yell and just feel horrible. And then, you know, because when I did, I said mean stuff, and things that were just because my lack of confidence came out, and my insecurities, and I threw accusations out there that were so far from the truth, you know, just to get a rise, right? I just
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to know
yeah.
she cared,
Yeah.
and the only way I could tell if she could cared
Was
is
in a fight.
if she cried, right?
Oh,
So yeah,
yeah.
no, it's pretty stupid, right?
I never cried, by the way.
Yeah, she never cared. No, I'm just kidding.
So actually, we just brought you guys in today because we need.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a time, and then it was like, wow, we haven't had a drag out yelling fight in a year, and then, you know, it just you start putting time under your belt, and it starts to like you start to see what it's like to live, you know, a better marriage and a more
And
you
it gets
know,
easier too as time goes by.
Well, and we had a lot of help. Like I said, we went to the newly married, like a couples group, and those leaders, Bob and Melissa Arndt, literally walked us through how to be married. I mean, Bob would sit us down and he would sit in front of us and he would tell, you know, we would talk and he'd be like, okay, Tom, Rachel is saying this. Now, Rachel, Tom means this when he says that. He would literally translate everything that was going on. I mean, we could have a drag out fight and we could call him at any time of day and they would walk us through.
Who was
all
dragging
of it
who out?
in so much love. I mean, whatever.
no, but that's so huge though to have.
It was
a couple
having
like that in your
mentors-
life.
Having mentors is incredible. Like I have a mentor in my alcoholism. Like we have mentors in marriage, parent. I mean, we now have so many mentors that it has been such a huge part of our lives. We would never give it up, and we would want to be mentors. I mean,
Right, yeah. And
we
you should
kind of mentor. You
But
know?
you could pass that. Then that's your guys. I mean, that's discipleship.
It was literally Bob said, you guys need to do this one day for a couple.
Right.
We're pouring into you and you need to do this for a couple. And we're like, okay. I mean, we took him very seriously. He spent so much time with us, and
That's
slowly
awesome.
but surely we started getting better. Communication started getting better. We were running businesses at the time. So we were working almost 90 hours a week, 60 hours a week. I mean, we were working very, very hard. We had very little time for free time. And that was most of our life. We started to try to have kids in 2008. We got pregnant. And after 6 weeks, miscarriage. Horrible. Totally grieved. Totally knew how to grieve. Wanted to grieve. Grieved for about a year. Tried again. Got pregnant. 7 weeks. Miscarriage. So bummed. Did not know that. Did not have. All I wanted to be was a mom. When
Yeah,
my dad
from
was
what you
like
said.
17, all I wanted to be was a mom.
Yeah.
Was so frustrated. It's like, what? So we waited another year, grieved for another year, got pregnant again. 8 weeks. We're making it. We're so much better. We're so excited. miscarriage.
Oh wow, this must have been real hard.
Oh my gosh, it was a mess. I was a mess. I was so angry. God, this is all I've ever wanted. Why can't I just have a baby? Like, this is all I've ever wanted to do. This is like, I went to culinary school. We own dry cleaners. I know how to cook. I know how to do laundry. Like, this is like the culmination. And now we're being, no, and I don't get to do this. It sucks. I was so upset. And I did have like not a suicidal moment, but I had like this, like, what is the point of life if I can't have a kid? Like, that's how a hold on it I had.
Right.
And so finally I was like, I need to get away. I need to go. I need to get away. And Tom was like, do whatever you need to do. I mean, he was just like, he didn't know. He was struggling as well. Like, it brought a lot of insecurities up in the marriage that we didn't know was there. We worked through that stuff. I ended up going to the beach for like a whole week and just like by myself, like crying and grieving and talking to God. And I remember at one point, I like imagined the babies in my hand. They were like little babies, like 6, 7, and 8 weeks. And I went into the ocean and I gave them back to God because he showed me, like, they're not your babies, like, they're my babies, and it's my choice, like, whether I give you those babies or not. It's up to me. It's not about you, and it's not about your will. It's about me and my will. And he's just been pounding that home for, a long time, that it's not about you, Rachel. It's not about your life. It's about what I want. And so I finally let it go. And I gave those babies back to God. And I said, you know what? If I never have kids, I know that you will make me happy. Like, I know that all I need is you. Oh, yeah.
That's powerful.
And I did feel better. I went home and I heard him tell me on that beach in California, in San Clemente, like, don't worry about the family that you don't have. Worry about the family that you have. And that's what I did. I was able to like take care of my great grandmother for a little while. My sister got really sick in Las Vegas, and I ended up driving out there like on a moment's notice. I just drove out there, and I was her advocate, and I got her back to New Mexico, where my parents were living at the time, and got her back home. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had a baby.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have been able to do that. And that was in October, and I let it go. And by April, I was pregnant with my daughter.
Wow.
Yeah. I was pregnant with my little girl, and I was nervous the whole time that I was going to lose her.
Right. Yeah.
But God took me. I mean, she was full term, perfect, beautiful little baby girl. Her name is Charlotte, and she's adorable.
Cute.
And 2.5 years later, I had a little boy named Matthew. He's Tom's little mini me. He's my little cuddle bug. And I get to be a mom.
a cuddle bug at my house too.
And I get to be a mom, and I get to be a stay-at-home mom. And that was in God's timing as well. Like, if I would have had a kid 3 years prior, I probably would have had to go back to work. We were in a different financial situation. And so to be able to be home and be with my babies and be solid in our marriage was like on another level cool. It was like, you are too good to me. Like, God, you are too good. Like, you literally spoil me.
That's awesome.
And just 3 years before, I was like,
yeah. But for you to be able to even say that and still go through those miscarriages, I mean, that's just huge to really feel the love that God has for you.
Totally.
And that maturity to see that. Because even, I don't know, when you were saying, a lot of this stuff was your will and it wasn't God's will, like, and that's just what God wanted. Like, sometimes I think that gives off like God sounds selfish, which it does talk about God being a jealous God, but there's horrible things that happen in the world and it doesn't come from God. There's evil in the world and it's not God bringing that about. Right. But he can redeem evil. He can redeem the bad into good.
Right.
And that's what it sounds like, or, what we're hearing in your story.
100%. And he does allow those things to happen in your life. I mean, he does allow, Satan, when he's with Jonah, or not Jonah. Job. God, he has to ask God to do this stuff to Job. And he allowed it.
Yeah.
So God does allow that kind of stuff. But what we don't understand is that God can see the future. God can see how those little traumas, those little irritants in our life, he covers them and covers them and covers them and covers them in his love. And it becomes a beautiful pearl for somebody else. Those little irritants that start out like so terrible and grief filled.
Right.
They
Just gave me
turn out.
Just gave me a great vision of a pearl being like our faith.
Dude, they're pearl.
how
They are.
beautiful
They're
that is.
beautiful.
And-
The traumas are beautiful. I have beautiful traumas that I get to share with people on a regular basis that help them feel like, oh my gosh, somebody knows what I'm going through. And I feel like you guys do that with this podcast, like having people share their experience and just having the feeling of, oh my gosh, I've totally been there. I know exactly how that feels is huge for people. They don't feel alone. They feel like, okay, maybe there is hope. Maybe I can get through this, you
Right.
know, like, and that's, it's in every trauma that I've ever experienced or shared, God has never wasted any of those traumas. I have always been able to see him in something, in some instance.
It's powerful.
But
I
I
know,
think,
it is.
I think that if you're willing to share, you can see it even more vividly. If you want to keep all your pearls and all your wisdom that God's held you, there's not going to be as much blessing.
Kind of
So
going back
that's-
to the discipleship, you know,
Exactly.
people were able to help you
Exactly.
in your walk, and then now through this podcast and probably through your church and whatever you guys are doing, you guys are going to help other people. You're going to God will put people in your path.
Oh, he already
You-
has.
and-
He already has. I had a girl that she'd struggled with 5 miscarriages, and I was sharing in a meeting one day about my miscarriages, and her husband comes up to me. He's like, "Can I get your number? My wife she needs help. She's been struggling with
That
miscarriages."
feeling of, for us as I think as people, just the feeling of being alone is so gripping and so strong, and that bondage of like I'm, losing hope and purpose. Like you were saying, you felt like your purpose was to be a mom and you couldn't do that, so you lost hope. But to have someone come along and say, "No, this is okay. It's fine. It hurts and stuff, but with God, we'll one day." Like you said, Drew, be redeemed, and all this will be redeemed. All this will make sense one day, and that's the hope that we have.
Totally. And I mean, the last miscarriage I had, I called the church and I was like, "You have to find me somebody that's been dealing with infertility, because I am losing my mind. I need to talk to somebody." Sure enough, he found somebody who had 5 miscarriages, and she talked to me for 2 hours, and I don't even remember what she said, but she knew exactly how I felt. And that was all I needed in order to push through and be like, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let this consume my whole world, because it was affecting our relationship. It was totally affecting us as a married couple, and with everybody else was having babies around me. It was just like,
That's
it was
hard.
torture, it was torture.
That's hard.
So it really helped me be able to push through and be like, God has a plan, and I don't get to choose that plan. I don't even get to know what that plan is. If I never know what God's plan for my life is, I need to be okay with that. I need to suck it up and be like, you know what? I trust you anyways. You've never, ever dropped me, ever. He's never, ever dropped me. He's always, always allowed me to see enough to give me hope to keep going.
And I'm sure all this stuff that just the way your relationship developed and all the stuff that led up to that point had to keep you just like, I know you're there.
Yeah.
I can't see you in this right now, but I know you're there. And that's what I was thinking about, that faith and that pearl. It's just like the stuff that we go through makes that pearl grow bigger, because it starts small, right? It's like a
Totally.
grain of sand, and then
Totally.
it just keeps on getting bigger and more beautiful. And that's kind of like our faith. It starts when Tom said, "Lord, I'm yours," and then now what? And then God's like, "Okay, give me, I help me do this walk." And then he sends these people that you're working with, and they're telling you about God. They're giving you a Bible, and that pearl just gets a little bit bigger, and your faith grows a little bit stronger. And then you go through this, the miscarriages, and you're like, man, this is so hard. I don't know what to do with this, but God, I know you're here. Help me. And then you have a baby, and you have 2 babies.
Yeah.
And look, and you guys are here, and you guys are happy. You guys are a beautiful couple.
I mean, we
I'm loving it.
definitely, yeah. Oh no, we've gone through our share of different, trials in marriage, and we've been married for almost 13 years, and just the last 2 years we have hit like a stride. Like God has just been like, we're gonna coast for a little
Tom
while.
said that's so good. I love
Oh,
that. Tom
no.
was like, yeah. that was solid.
Yeah, God's done a lot of work on me, is what she's trying to say. She was pretty good when we started. So, yeah, it's God is amazing. I mean, I know if you ask my friends and you ask people even, you know, that were around us back then, they look and go, how in
Let's
the
call Nick right now.
world?
Let's call him. Let's get him on speaker. What was Tom like,
Oh,
really?
you don't want to know. Yeah. Yeah, he was going to be.
Oh yeah,
here.
he did tell me that. He's like, "Can I sit in?" I said, "Yeah, come." But
Yeah.
didn't work out, I guess.
Yeah, so.
No, I just want to thank you guys. Was there anything?
I don't know. I think having marriage, like people that are older than you that have gone through marriage that like totally understand like the ins and outs of how God uses marriage in so many awesome ways, and to just have cheerleaders for your marriage, not only as peers, but as, you know, mentors for us has been absolutely 100% instrumental in keeping us super strong and super together. And I mean, just God confirming everything for us was just, we can do this. We know this is what we're supposed to do. We can totally do this. And just to, you know, any situation that you're in, any trauma that you're in, somebody has been there. Find them.
Yeah.
Find a support group. Find people at church. Find wherever you can find resources, find somebody that's been there and pick their brain. I mean, suck them dry. They will totally appreciate you as someone being mentored. Like when I do work with other alcoholics, it is a joy and a blessing and a huge thrill, and I absolutely 100% love it. So don't ever feel like, oh, my stuff's too dark or whatever's going on. Share your stuff, because one day it'll be a beautiful pearl for somebody else.
Amen.
Yeah, and it starts with vulnerability. I mean, you can't, especially for the guys out there. I know we have a great couple now that you know, we have as a mentor couple, and you know, Bob 13 years ago, you know, I mean, he straight up accountability wise, I mean, he told me man up, which to me at that time was a strong, those were fighting words,
For sure.
right? But it
No.
took that. I mean, you know, just being open to it. I mean, he used to always tell me I'd dig my heels in, right? Which there's a healthy level of digging your heels in to make sure you're protecting yourself. But you got to just release, let go, you know, be vulnerable, be open, and let people hold you accountable. Be open to the responses. And you know, I mean, God's working through other people.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be a private whittling in the corner, right? It's going to use other people to form us and grow us to be more Christ-like.
Yeah.
So we've been married for 13 years, and Tom will be celebrating 13 years of sobriety in April.
So May 12th, the night before I came out here, was the last time I had a drink. So yeah, May 12th.
And I'll be celebrating
You
15
mean
years.
when you went to Arizona?
Yeah,
Or
so
to
the
visit.
night before I came to Arizona,
Okay.
because I was partying and all that good
Yeah,
stuff, or not good stuff, but bad stuff. But yeah, the night before I came out here, I was partying, and one of the things that God definitely put heavy on my heart with my prayer to take her out of my life, he started just taking the things out of my life that would push her out of my life. And that was the first thing.
Because you guys wouldn't be able to be together if
It was an
If you were
unspoken
drinking.
thing. It literally happened, and I mean, I just stopped drinking. Just
Yeah.
stopped that night, and you know, I mean, it wouldn't work without it.
Right,
you know?
yeah.
no.
Yeah, I was only 2 years sober at the time that me and Tom met, and I was 25, and I think it would have been really, really hard to be married to someone that drank.
I wouldn't.
even
Yeah.
if it wasn't in like an unhealthy way, like
Right.
or you know what I mean, like, oh, I just want
Right.
to have a glass of wine after
Well,
work.
and in
like that.
hindsight, seeing, you know, knowing that he was a new Christian and seeing all the troubles that we would have had if we would have had alcohol in there. Oh my
yeah.
gosh, I
Forget
can't
about
even
Forget about it.
imagine.
Yeah.
So I'm celebrating 15 years of sobriety in
Congratulations.
July.
That's
Congratulations to
Yeah,
both of you guys,
yeah,
and
thank
13
you.
years of marriage.
Yeah.
That's
13
awesome.
years of marriage to me is like so much more than sobriety. I'm like, 13 years of marriage. That's amazing, honey.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I
We
do
had-
want. I'm sorry. No, I kind of to what you guys are saying though. This is a thing about like people can't have a thing about church, and this is at least in the context of being a Christ follower, because we're talking about discipleship and mentorship and stuff like that. Jesus' last commandment for us was to go and make disciples of men.
Great
You know,
commission.
to be mentor, to help these people. And I mean, not to say that it can be like that in the world. I'm sure, you know, there's that, but I mean, I think the most righteous path is through, you know, discipleship to Jesus. And it's in having a community, and that's where you meet these mentors is in your community. And I know that it's hard for some people to go to church, and it can be because they have whatever perception, they either were hurt by the church or whatever, just you see Bible thumpers, or whatever, people are telling you you're going to go to hell, and that's not a good depiction of who Jesus is. Jesus is a God who loves and who has grace and who is merciful. And it stinks if the church has not depicted Jesus in the best way, and it's pushed people away from church. But it is a good place to go find people to help guide you through this life and to show you who God really is, and to help you walk that path, whether it's in sobriety, whether it's in anger, whether it's in loneliness, or whatever it is that has us broken and suffering and hurting. That's not what God wants for us.
Yeah.
And I think if you do have like resentments against religion in particular, like what is your part of that? Like to find out what is your side of that? Like, did you have expectations? Do you have a different view? Like, what is your part of that resentment of church? Did they wrong you? How did they wrong you? And everybody's not like that,
No, for sure not.
And you need to pray. I mean, as far as like where God wants you. I mean, if you don't want to go to church, that's fine. There were lots of years we did not go to church where we just physically couldn't get there, and it was just that we did not feel guilt. We felt that God had us. We were still doing a lot of work spiritually, and just pray. I mean, your relationship with God is completely personal.
Yep.
If He wants you to go somewhere, guess what? You're gonna go. He's not going to allow you not to be there.
And my point was just to that, what you guys were saying about just finding people. It's just a good place where you can find people.
And you can find people. God can use anybody.
Yep.
You do not have to. I did not have a Christian sponsor when I got into recovery.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, wow.
Like God used lots of unbelievers to help me get sober, counseling. I mean, He can use anybody at any time.
No, you're right. You're right.
He can speak through anybody, even if they're not believers.
That's a good point.
So you can you can get help anywhere.
Absolutely.
I feel like if you just pray and be like, God, I need help, He will give you what you need. Just stay in contact with Him and don't numb yourself. In this culture, we have a tendency to numb ourselves, not only with alcohol or drugs, but with shopping or
media,
culture, or exactly. Well, you can numb yourself with anything as long as you're not numbing yourself and your motive is pure and you genuinely are seeking God. He's going to tell you where you need to be, whether that's in church or in a podcast or wherever.
Definitely.
I need to ask myself that question next time I take a selfie. What is this for, Isaac? No, that's. I was but we need each other though.
Absolutely.
Because
we can't do this alone.
God created this for us to be in community and with people. We're not here to do it alone. And like you were saying, listening, or those people listening or hearing the story from someone else and knowing that you're in that same exact position or someone's in the same position you were in 5 years ago or whatever the case may be, like that's huge for people to just feel that they're not alone, and that you can get through this. There's the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So
Totally.
So Tom and Rachel, thank you very much for being here. Great.
It was amazing.
Thank you for having us.
It was super fun.
Thanks, Nick, for setting this up.
No, this was a good journey. I felt like we had a journey this morning, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
I had all the feelings. It was good. It was good.
I think they say all the feels or something like that.
I'm Mexican, Drew. I say feelings.
All right, so let's close this one out. Once again, another good episode in the books. For those of you listening out there, I'm sure you're going to love these 2 episodes that you get to listen to from Tom and Rachel and gain from it. I know we have and we will.
So you're welcome.
Yeah. So we encourage you to reach out to us. Let us know who you are and where you're listening from. If you're listening on iTunes, scroll down a little bit and give us a little rate and review. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, One Story Podcast.
Like it, share it, tell your friends.
Yeah, that's what we'd ask. Like, share it with your friends, tell people about this, and we'll see how far this goes and where it can spread to. So with that,
open your eyes, listen closely, soften your heart, and ask God to reveal Himself to you.
Amen.